Well, Logan, people, so let's talk about this thing very quick. This X-Men franchise has been very interesting. You know, there's been good, there's been bad. It's essentially like a relationship, right? You had the good years at the very beginning, then you kind of had the bad years, a little bit of the rough times, and then you had, you know, the kind of the makeup years, but for some reason you actually wanted to make this relationship work. Through thick and thin and flying dishes and F-bombs, you wanted to kind of make this shit kind of go through. Why? Because you actually cared about this person and you were willing to make this shit kind of work and see this thing through. That's kind of like with the relationship between the X-Men franchise and me and probably a lot of people just to begin with. But nonetheless, I like watching these things even with all their flaws. Now, on top of the Wolverine films, well, obviously X-Men films just to begin with, you have origins people don't really like. You have the Wolverine, which I feel like it didn't reach its full potential that it could have done, and unfortunately I feel like maybe the R rating not being there was kind of what was holding it back or whatever, but it was something that was holding it back from being the character study that people wanted it to be. Now we have Logan, hyped as fuck, right? Johnny Cash getting in all that emotional type of goodness. Does it deliver on all that? Does it promise you everything that it showed in the trailer and give you a satisfying conclusion, which may or may not actually be Hugh Jackman's final film? The answer is, simply put, yes. Now, people are calling this kind of like the game changer. You know, this is the Dark Knight of the X-Men franchise. And that's a bold statement that I don't know if I can speak for everyone per se and say that, but I would say that it is pretty fucking close. I think this movie is actually one of those type of films that it feels like it's trying to do something different. It's not trying to hold your hand, and it's not trying to, you know, please to the blockbuster demographic of people that just want an all-out Wolverine slashing people type of event. And boy, don't get me wrong, motherfuckers are getting cut up like sliced, you know, turkey for the most part, but it still adds for something else just to begin with. Now, right off the bat, I can tell you this right now. If you're expecting this to be just like a wham bam X-Men movie, then don't. And I feel like that's going to be, that might be where people get lost, or people might just be like, it's okay, or whatever it may be. But I feel like this movie is trying to be a character study, which is pretty much what Wolverine wanted to be, but it also tried to be a little bit of an action movie, and I feel like you had that dumbness kind of thrown in here. This movie is not trying to appease to like the brain dead blockbuster, you know, audience for the most part. It's trying to deliver you something that you can get invested in from start to finish. And I feel like if you enjoyed Jackman's Wolverine from 2000 to now, or even Patrick Stewart's Xavier, then I think you'll be on board. If you've hated them all the way through and you're still complaining, then you might not give a fuck. That's just a simple case. Now, this movie does take its time. It is not trying to, you know, hold your hand and say, let's run all the way to the finish line very quickly. It takes its time. It has these small character moments between X-23, Charles, and Wolverine, which are the main focus points just to begin with. And even Stephen Merchant comes in for some of the fun, which is interesting enough to see just to begin with. Now, overall, a lot of people can pretty much say, how's the performances? Are the performances good? Are they bad? Are they awful? What does it mean for Hugh Jackman's final turn? Jackman is fantastic, and I feel like he really does do a good enough job to the point where I love it when I watch a movie and I could get emotionally invested, but I really love it when I can see something kind of where it's like art imitating life, you know, because not only this is the end for Jackman, but this is possibly the end for Stewart or whatever, but this is the end for Jackman, this is the end for Wolverine, and they are putting their all and like their final outing to the end completely. This one last thing, and they are giving it their final all, and it shows on screen. X-23 is fantastic, aka Laura, I believe her name was, and she does really good. Now, in case you probably actually haven't heard, you know, this is a mild spoiler, she's pretty much Wolverine's daughter, which is pretty much like, okay, come on. It's like, you pretty much knew that by now. But just in general, she's a girl that doesn't really talk much. Obviously, she's very brutal, and something very kind of special about just seeing a small chick, maybe it's like Hit Girl, where it's just like, she's just killing people left and right. And it is actually quite fantastic to see. I know, kids doing violence, that's a bad thing. No. But overall, I think it's actually quite fun to see. And she's one of the type of chicks or girls, whatever, that I feel like she can say so much just with like facial expressions. And I think she does a really good job. Charles is in this thing, obviously, and he's great. It's nice seeing him kind of like being older or whatever, the same age as Wolverine. Not the same age, but like the same aging type of Wolverine. They're both getting older, coming to the conclusion, and that's pretty much what the basic thing is. And Patrick Stewart does a fantastic job. If this guy can make curse words from Xavier seem natural, you know, then I think he's pretty much fantastic. But then again, you know, he's the same guy that made Engage sound pretty cool. But that is what it is. Now, obviously, Wolverine has a very violent tone. The violence is pretty much full in effect. Motherfuckers are getting sliced up. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of gory shit that will actually probably make you even scarred to the point where you probably are left up at night. If you're comfortable with violence, then great. This movie doesn't go into the B-level movie type of violence to the point where it's just like all over the place for no nonsense. Everything serves a purpose, from the cursing from Charles or whatever, or even Wolverine, to just simply put people getting cut open. Like, you know, as I said, like there's a lot of blood in this movie, right? Just to begin with. And a lot of things seem very brutal. There's a lot of blood, like, you know, that time of month for a trailer park slut. But overall, that's kind of what it is. This movie tries to serve up a purpose and then builds up to a conclusion. It's not worried about trying to get to the end very quickly. It has these small moments and exploring about what Wolverine is, or who Wolverine is for the most part, Logan, and just how time pretty much is the ultimate truth teller. And I really did enjoy that. Obviously, this movie has a lot of Western themes going on with it, and the same thing for apocalyptic themes. And it has a gigantic fucking Last of Us halo that just made me just go berserk, no pun intended, while watching this movie, and I really did, quite frankly, enjoy it. Obviously, it feels like The Last of Us. Anybody that don't say that, you're crazy. But it really is fantastic to see all the way through, and I feel like the performances are really great. And even though there's a lot of violence and whatnot all kind of thrown into the mix, it definitely feels natural, and it feels like it's the Wolverine movie that we wanted to see for quite some time. This guy just going completely mad. Now, on top of that, there are a few problems that I do have with this movie. And on top of just being like a Western, so to speak, but it also shows that just time catches up to all of us, whether it be our past or whatever. Age is nothing more, not only than a number, but it's something that can really haunt us, and it can really scar us for the most part. But it shows that, you know, nobody can be immortal forever without having, you know, problems, so to speak. And I think it really did a fantastic job of doing that just to begin with. Now, the problems I have with this movie, simply put, is that it does feel a little bit kind of like it goes into the same realm as what we've already seen about Wolverine dealing with his past and, you know, he's losing people, whatever. I feel like we've seen that a little bit more. We've seen that before, but they explored a little bit more deeper, and I did enjoy that. Now, the action scenes are fantastic. And as I said, they build up to the action scenes. They don't just hand it to you. They make things feel very good. And the tone, from the tone to the cinematography, to just overall the way the dialogue is kind of presented, you feel like you're going to get something that is going to require your time to get emotionally invested. You may feel like you're bored in this thing. This may feel a little bit tedious because it's not the wham bam superhero movie. But that's okay, I feel like, because this movie is not concerned about necessarily, and boy, do they want to make money, but they're not concerned about necessarily just pleasing someone because of the action scenes. When the action scenes go, they deliver, and you might find it boring. You might not care about when these characters are in a dire situation, if they may or may not die, not necessarily because of the script, but mainly because you may actually fall asleep. Because you're not really on board from start to finish. And if you're on board start to finish, you get a satisfying conclusion at the end. But back to my negatives. My negatives is simply put the villains. I enjoyed Boyd Holbrook. I thought he was actually kind of cool. I thought the doctor, you know, whatever it may be, I thought he was kind of Richard Grant, I believe. I thought he was okay. On top of many other surprises or whatever, but this movie's not trying to be an X-Men cameo Easter egg fest. You get some of that there, and it's also cool to see. But at the same time, this is just like an end of an era for Jackman. The same way, if you remember the movie Shane, was just kind of like a way of showing that these are people that were just kind of loved for being heroes. And a world with no heroes is a pretty scary world. And I think that's what X-23 and Wolverine's relationship essentially is, and obviously is a little bit more. But that's all you can really say about this movie. This movie delivers on doing something very special and just showing our superheroes in the light of us, which essentially is that they age, they have problems, they have all these things kind of combined together. This is not worried about sci-fi elements or confusing stories. It's simple and it's straight to the point, and maybe it feels a little bit predictable in some cases, but there's enough twists and turns that you can feel like there's something special being brought on board here. And I think Mangold, Jackman, Stewart, and even, you know, X-23 herself, I think do a fantastic job, to the point where by the time this thing ends, if you're not crying or at least slightly just shocked as to like what you saw and just like stilted, then I don't really know what to say. Maybe you're dead inside. But overall, this thing delivers on what you wanted. An emotionally investing character study of Logan, and gives him a final conclusion, which is what most superhero movies don't actually manage to do, and that is actually have an end. Just like The Dark Knight, they build up to something that was clearly meant to kind of be an ending. But overall, like I said, I think this delivers on the stuff that you love in X-Men movies, but it has some of the problems, I think, a little bit in there. You might find it slow, you might find it a little bit boring, but if you're willing to get invested into the story from start to finish, which I think you will because it's really fantastic, then I think you'll get something very rewarding that's not necessarily a you know, an X-Men movie per se, but just a Logan film that I think the Wolverine wanted to be, but it failed that completely. But that's just my thought, and that's just my opinion. Comment, subscribe, share this video if you can. I'm Chris Smith, and I'm signing out.